Our story begins with a young man who hoped his family name would carry him to the peak of life, but those dreams were shattered the moment his younger brother was born. At his birth, the boy was surrounded by a golden glow as a heavenly chime rang out, drawing thousands to worship him in a grand spectacle. That single act of worship caused the infant to jump 5 cultivation levels instantly, while our protagonist, Lin, was left with such poor talent that everyone labeled him a useless failure. Naturally, all resources and the position of family heir went to his brother, and even Lin's arranged marriage was abruptly called off by the bride's family. Driven by such humiliation, he shouted that classic vow, "The tide turns every 30 years. Do not look down on a youth just because he is currently poor." After all, being a reincarnated soul facing a broken engagement is the perfect setup for a hero, yet the cheap power he expected simply failed to appear. With no other choice, he accepted his fate of mediocrity until, at 18, his father banished him to the remote Bufung fields, even forbidding him from using the Lin family name. The only one willing to accompany him was his loyal maid, Manhwa, but it was then that a mechanical voice suddenly echoed in his mind. It congratulated him on becoming a certified failure and announced that the daily intelligence system had been successfully activated to provide him with 2 random secrets each day. The first piece of intel revealed that in 3 days, a disciple named Chu Feng would find an ancient primordial beast in the Hengduan Mountains. The second report stated that inside blind box number 62 at the Wanbao Chamber of Commerce, there was a hidden bestiary. If he burned that book, he would obtain the heaven-devouring demonic art, a revelation that made Lin jump to his feet in pure excitement. A primordial beast is exactly what it sounds like, a creature from the dawn of time with immense power, but the demonic art was even more intriguing. It is a formidable technique that allows one to grow stronger by devouring the essence of others, and it has no specific requirements for cultivation. Anyone can learn it, and with every unique constitution the practitioner consumes, their strength increases significantly. Of course, a technique that involves stealing from others is considered a path of pure evil in the cultivation world, but for Lin, it represented his only hope. He decided instantly that he had to get his hands on that demonic art before heading toward the Hengduan Mountains. He had 3 days before the beast would be found, so he rushed at top speed to the Wanbao Chamber of Commerce. He went straight to the shopkeeper and demanded blind box number 62, which the old man brought down with a knowing smile. The shopkeeper remarked on his luck, mentioning that someone else had just wanted that very box, but left to find more money, never imagining Lin would swoop in first. As it turns out, he had arrived just in time. Lin felt a sudden surge of anxiety, knowing the heaven-devouring demonic art was inside that box. If someone else had bought it, this golden opportunity would have vanished forever. Fortunately, he didn't hesitate and paid the shopkeeper immediately. After tucking the box into his storage ring, he found a secluded spot to open it. With a crisp click, the lid popped open. Inside, the bestiary lay quietly, looking perfectly ordinary. Following the system's instructions, he set the book ablaze. Then, something truly magical happened. From the smoldering ashes, he pulled out a piece of bone the size of his palm. He wondered for a moment if it was a fragment of a skull. Suddenly, mysterious runes began to glow and float upon the bone's surface. The runes transformed into specks of starlight and surged into his forehead, etching the secrets of the demonic art into his mind. He began to practice the technique immediately. As he circulated his energy, the essence of heaven and earth for 100 meters around rushed toward him. The sheer force of this energy finally blasted open the long-closed gates of his cultivation path. We see that this world's cultivation is divided into many realms, each with 5 layers. For most geniuses, reaching physical mastery takes years. Yet, after practicing the heaven-devouring demonic art for just a single night, Lin achieved what others struggle for half a decade to reach. To be honest, unbelievable was the only word that could describe his mood as the system's voice echoed in his mind once more. Today's first intel, a thief named Mo Yi, who possesses the rare primal yang body, is currently committing a series of heinous crimes nearby. The second report revealed that a mountain treasure had appeared in the Hengduan Mountains, drawing many cultivators, though none would find it for 3 days. Lin's eyes gleamed with a new realization. The primal yang body was exactly the kind of special constitution his new art required. If he could devour Mo Yi, he might break through to the god burial realm. It seemed the primordial beast would have to wait a little longer. He decided to hunt the thief first. Following the system's markers, he arrived at a scene of high-speed pursuit. A woman in white, sword in hand, was chasing a thin, wretched-looking man while shouting for the villain to stop. The woman was Su Qingyuan, a disciple of the Bright Moon Palace. She had been traveling with her junior sister when disaster struck. They had been targeted by the thief Mo Yi, and sadly, her sister had already fallen victim to his cruel schemes. Although Mo Yi was being pursued by the woman behind him, he didn't look panicked at all. Instead, he kept shouting vulgar and provocative words. He continued to taunt her until Su Qingyuan's face turned bright red with rage, her sword pointed directly at the thief. Just as she prepared to strike, her body suddenly went limp and she collapsed, her sword clattering to the ground as her voice failed her. she gasped, asking what he had done, while Moe laughed, explaining it was a medicine designed to release her inhibitions and spark her primal desires. He suggested they become a pair of wild birds together, and looking at Su Qingyuan's pure and lovely face, he could no longer restrain his impulses. He lunged forward immediately. Su Qingyuan's expression changed as she was pinned to the ground, trying to push him off but finding she had no strength. At that moment, Lin quietly picked up the long sword from the ground and aimed it directly at Mo Ye's backside. With a single thrust, Mo Ye let out a blood-curdling scream, twitched violently, and breathed his last. To be honest, it was a rather undignified end. The thief likely never imagined he would die in such a way. Seeing the threat was gone, Lin stepped forward to take the body and leave. Suddenly, the heaven-devouring demonic art began to circulate on its own, refining the primal yang body as pure energy flooded into Lin's system. He wanted to find a secluded place to digest this power, but the delirious Su Qingyuan suddenly grabbed him, begging for help. He frowned, realizing she had been poisoned by an aphrodisiac. If the toxin wasn't neutralized, her meridians would rupture, leading to her death. After a moment of hesitation, he chose to save her. An hour later, the ordeal was finally over. Lin's constitution had become even stronger. It's no exaggeration to say that compared to his past life, he was now essentially a Superman. He looked down at Su Qingyuan, left a few spirit stones for her, and departed. Shortly after he left, Su Qingyuan slowly opened her eyes. Though her mind had been clouded, she had a faint impression of what happened. The thief hadn't succeeded, and someone else had saved her. She dressed quickly, only to discover that her cultivation realm had unexpectedly broken through. Previously, she was only in the god burial realm. Now, she had actually stepped into the spirit sea realm. Before she could even process the surprise, she spotted the spirit stones on the ground. Her heart flared with anger, wondering what he took her for. She vowed that no matter who he was, she would never let him get away with this. Meanwhile, we find that Lin had already reached the Hengduan Mountains. Following the system's guidance, he discovered a beast egg at the mountain's base. It was only the size of a fist, yet it glowed with a deep azure hue. When Lin's fingers brushed against it, he could actually feel a faint, steady pulse. He carefully examined this peculiar beast egg, which looked as though it were on the verge of hatching. To help it along, he placed several spirit stones around it. As he waited by its side, the shell began to tremble. The top of the shell gradually peeled away, revealing a small head covered in golden red down. Moments later, the shell shattered completely as the little creature emerged. The beast stood up, flapping its wings and tilting its head to look at Lin. Suddenly, it shook its body, spreading golden red wings that stirred up a surprisingly powerful breeze. Lin let out a soft cry of surprise, realizing this appeared to be a wind thunder eagle hatchling. The little bird then hopped onto his shoulder, affectionately rubbing its head against his cheek. He frowned slightly, wondering what he should name the little fellow. Perhaps iron egg or emerald flower? To be honest, naming things was never his strongest suit. The wind thunder eagle seemed to understand his words and grew anxious, chirping and gesturing wildly. Lin tried to decipher what the little creature was trying to convey. He asked if it meant that it would grow up to be a mighty overlord of the skies, and therefore wanted to be called Tianba, the sky tyrant. The little eagle nodded immediately, and Lin looked at it with a gentle smile. Tianba it is then, he said, as long as the little one was happy with it. By the time Tianba was named, darkness had already fallen. Lin decided to rest for the night, and the next morning, the system delivered its daily report right on schedule. The first piece of intel mentioned a heavy rainstorm in Xinyan village, which had washed away the earth to reveal a stone tablet covered in mysterious runes. By arranging these runes in a specific order, one could obtain the human king seal. As for the correct sequence, that was a secret for Lin to uncover. The second report revealed an ancient tomb in Mount Diu currently being excavated by the Earth Dragon Gang. A map of the tomb was available for his perusal. Lin found both pieces of information quite tempting. The human king seal was a formidable technique. At its peak, its power was said to be capable of shattering the heavens. With a map in hand, the tomb was certainly worth a visit. However, he decided he would secure the mountain treasure first before moving on to other prizes. As we follow him deeper into the Hengduan Mountains, we see that the landscape is already scarred by the traces of many fierce battles. Knowing his current strength wasn't yet absolute, Lin proceeded with great caution, avoiding contact with other cultivators. After all, he knew the world well enough by now. He understood that sometimes, fellow cultivators are far more dangerous than the most savage beasts. As he neared the treasure's location, two middle-aged men approached from the distance. Lin felt a surge of wariness as he realized both men were powerful experts of the spirit sea realm. At that moment, the younger of the two stepped forward. The younger man wondered aloud if the mountain treasure was hidden too deep, or if perhaps someone else had already snatched it away. The older man replied with absolute certainty that such a spiritual object would have caused a massive disturbance if moved. They had to keep looking. As the two set off again, Lin took their conversation as a silent warning. He realized that once he claimed the treasure, he would need to disguise himself immediately to avoid detection. Once the pair was gone, he hurried toward the treasure's exact coordinates. With the system guiding his every step, he finally found it, a piece of lightning-struck wood. To be honest, it looked like a common dead root. He brushed his hand against it, marveling at how easily such a treasure could be overlooked. Without wasting a moment, he began to dig. But as the wood was unearthed, a pillar of light suddenly shot into the sky, and the silhouette of a vivid dragon flickered in the clouds. This spectacle immediately drew the eyes of every cultivator in the vicinity. Before long, everyone began rushing toward his exact location. Lin quickly stashed the treasure in his storage ring and hid. He knew that running toward the exit now would only invite suspicion. His plan was simple: wait for the crowd to arrive, then pretend he had just gotten there himself. It was a classic move to blend in. Soon, a large group gathered, including the two brothers from earlier, who were now cursing their luck for having walked right past the spot. Suddenly, a refined-looking middle-aged man stepped forward. Lin felt a surge of dread. This man radiated the powerful aura of the divine work realm. The crowd whispered in hushed tones, quickly identifying the newcomer as Chu Xian, a rogue cultivator with a formidable reputation in the martial world. Chu Xian called for silence with a cold voice. He demanded to know if anyone had seen someone fleeing toward the edge of the mountains. The cultivators all shook their heads in unison. Chu Xian's sharp gaze swept across the crowd, lingering on every face he saw. He concluded that the one who took the treasure must still be among them. He advised the thief to hand it over now to avoid trouble. He warned that if he had to find it himself, he wouldn't be nearly as polite. A quarter of an hour passed, yet no one stepped forward. Lin watched the scene from an inconspicuous corner. He knew that in this world, no one would be foolish enough to just give up such a prize. Chu Xian's expression darkened. He commanded everyone to present their storage rings for a manual inspection, a bold move, to say the least. He signaled to a companion, and another divine work realm expert suddenly released a crushing pressure to ensure everyone complied. The sheer pressure suppressed every cultivator present. Chu Xian's bold move had offended everyone, yet no one expected that too. Divine work realm experts had secretly joined forces. Lin's brow furrowed deeply. He knew he couldn't just sit and wait for death. He quietly activated the heaven-swallowing demonic art and then shouted at the top of his lungs, "Don't trust him. He's going to rob us. Run." The crowd of cultivators immediately scattered in a panic. Seeing this, Chu Xian and his ally began to ruthlessly strike down the fleeing men. Lin took advantage of the chaos to flee for his life. Fortunately, his demonic art could hide his aura and lower his presence significantly. Amidst the sounds of slaughter, we see him finally break through the Hengduan Mountains. But he didn't dare stop, not even for a second. After running for a full hour, he finally collapsed under a large tree to rest, his breath coming in heavy, ragged gasps. He hadn't expected divine work realm experts to be there. It was a close call. But at last, the mountain treasure was his. He pulled out a map to check his location and realized he was quite close to Xinian village. His eyes lit up with sudden interest. Since he was nearby, he decided to check out the mysterious stone tablet. He immediately set off for Xinian village, a simple farming community. Days of torrential rain had triggered mudslides. While the village itself was spared, the farmland was destroyed, ruining the villagers' livelihoods. A nearby Taoist temple had come to provide aid, and that was when they discovered the tablet. Soon, Lin arrived at the village. He found a group of Taoists there. The younger ones were mesmerized by the tablet's runes, but an old Taoist noticed his arrival. The old Taoist offered a polite greeting, asking what brought a traveler to Xinian village so soon after such a terrible natural disaster. Lin put on a look of sorrow, explaining he was just passing through and hoped for a cup of water, unaware of the tragedy that had struck. The old Taoist warmly invited him to the Qingfeng temple. Lin smiled and subtly steered the conversation toward the mysterious stone tablet. He thanked the man, but declined the stay, asking instead what the sect leader found so fascinating about that particular stone. The old Taoist hid nothing and explained that while they were helping the village, they realized this stone had actually saved the entire town. He noted that the runes were incredibly mysterious and likely held great secrets. He invited Lin, as a fellow cultivator, to try and decipher them. Lin was surprised by the old Taoist's complete honesty. Such a broad-minded spirit was certainly not something one saw every day. With a look of deep gratitude, Lin thanked the old Taoist and quickly made his way toward the stone tablet. The runes and markings on the stone were densely packed, numbering in the hundreds, and hidden within them was the human king's seal. For an ordinary cultivator, deciphering this seal would be nearly impossible, but Lin had his system to master the arrangement rules. Half an hour later, a sudden hum echoed in his mind like an explosion, and the majestic words "Human King Seal" appeared. In that moment, he also came to understand the true history of this mysterious stone tablet. Thousands of years ago, the human king had too many enemies. To protect his descendants from being hunted after his death, he severed all karmic ties with them. Consequently, the once glorious clan of the human king began to gradually decline. Most importantly, the human king seal could only be mastered by his true descendants, which meant Xinian village held a great secret. Lin realized with a start that these villagers were the king's bloodline, and he vowed to repay them for this inheritance. He immediately found the village chief and asked him to gather everyone together, wasting no time with his announcement. He expressed his sorrow over the disaster that hit Xinian village, urging the people to find the strength to carry on. He offered what gold, silver, and food he had, asking the villagers to line up so he could distribute it personally. While these riches were nothing compared to the value of the seal, they were everything he could give at that moment. Hope returned to the villagers' eyes as they knelt to thank him, some even breaking into tears of pure relief. The old Taoist bowed in respect as well, but Lin quickly hurried to help them up, insisting such gestures weren't necessary. After spending some time talking with the locals, he finally left Xinian village and returned to Goofing City after dark. He took out the thunderstruck wood to study it, only to watch in shock as it suddenly took root in the ground. The roots extended deep into the earth while a green sprout grew before his eyes, turning into a half-meter willow branch. As he stared at this miraculous sight, Wanyue appeared, her face lighting up with joy at the sight of his return. However, when her gaze fell upon the charred piece of wood, she frowned in confusion, wondering what he had brought back. She asked why he'd brought back dry tree roots, but Lin quickly explained this was thunderstruck wood, a rare treasure with immense power. He then changed the subject, asking if dinner was ready, which successfully distracted Wanyue as she invited him to come and eat. During dinner, Wanyue rested her chin on her hands, her large eyes fixed intently on him until he began to feel a bit self-conscious. Lin set down his chopsticks and asked if there was something on his face, to which she softly replied that he seemed different since his return. Not ready to reveal his secrets just yet, he gave a vague answer to brush the topic aside. After dinner, he spent more time studying the thunderstruck wood, but finding no new clues, he eventually retired to his room to cultivate. What he didn't know, however, was that the willow branch sprouting from the wood had begun to emit a soft, ethereal glow. This light gradually enveloped the small courtyard, while the winged thunderbird he'd brought back built a small nest right beside the wood. The bird's clever eyes were full of curiosity toward the branch as the night passed, and soon, it was time for the day's new intelligence. The first report stated that the Wanbao Chamber of Commerce would restock mystery boxes this afternoon, with box 36 containing a hidden scroll. Once exposed to sunlight, this scroll would reveal the Xing secret cultivation method, a truly legendary find. The second report mentioned that Yesha, the young master of the Nine Jade evil sect who possessed 10 strands of evil aura, would pass through the city tomorrow. Lin was stunned. The Xing secret was one of the 9 secrets, granting the world's greatest speed to anyone who mastered it. As for the young master, his 10 strands of aura were essentially a gift of experience points waiting to be claimed. Since the mystery box wouldn't arrive until the afternoon, Lin decided to head out early to handle some other business. Suddenly sensing movement behind him, he ducked into the nearby woods just as 2 suspicious figures emerged from a hidden tunnel. One of them, a clean-looking man, complained that the ancient tomb was built like a maze, making it impossible to find the main chamber. His companion, covered in dust, agreed, noting that the traps had already cost them many men and wondering if they should even continue. Just then, a joyful voice echoed from within the tunnel, announcing that they had finally found the correct path to the main tomb. The leader of the Earth Dragon Gang, Lu Biao, was visibly startled by the news and quickly hurried back down into the passage. Seeing this, Lin immediately sprang into action. Since he held the map to the ancient tomb, he didn't need to use the tunnel they had dug. Instead, he made his way to a small mountain stream and dove straight into the water, where a hidden passage led directly into the tomb. Before long, we see him enter the main burial chamber, where a stone coffin hung, suspended in midair by 4 heavy iron chains. The surface of the coffin was covered in suppression runes, and even the surrounding walls were plastered with dense layers of yellow paper talismans. Looking at this rather dramatic scene, Lin felt a sudden wave of unease, wondering if the corpse inside was about to spring back to life. Aside from these talismans meant to suppress evil, there was nothing else in the room, prompting him to frown as he looked toward the coffin. He couldn't leave empty-handed after coming all this way, so, hoping the body wouldn't reanimate, he leaped onto the coffin and forced it open. A fragrant scent suddenly wafted from within, making him instantly tense. Normally, a stone coffin should smell of decay, not perfume. This was highly unusual, to say the least, and inside the coffin lay a woman in a red robe, resting in a state of eerie stillness. Her features were as delicate as a painting, hinting at her past beauty, but the most alarming detail was the corpse's settling talisman on her forehead. Lin swallowed hard, certain he was dealing with a powerful spirit, and wiped the cold sweat from his brow as he surveyed the scene. Still, he couldn't stop his gaze from drifting toward the storage ring on her finger, whispering a quiet apology to the silent woman. Claiming he was a bit short on funds lately, he nimbly slid the ring off her finger, closed the lid, and hurried out of the chamber. A short while later, the doors to the main chamber were thrown open again as the men from the Earth Dragon Gang burst inside. They noticed the coffin lid had been moved but ignored the warning talismans entirely, rushing forward to surround the stone structure. Their leader, Lu Biao, climbed onto the coffin and shoved the lid aside, and the moment he saw the woman, he instinctively swallowed hard. Without thinking, he reached out to pull back her red robe, intent on examining her perfectly preserved form more closely. But just then, a sudden cold wind swept through the room, and the talisman on the woman's forehead began to burn with an eerie light. It turned to ash in an instant, and as the woman in red opened her eyes, Lu Biao felt his soul nearly leave his body in terror. He turned to flee, but a cold hand had already pierced through his back and crushed his heart before he could even let out a scream. His body withered and shriveled in an instant, a sight so terrifying that the others immediately scrambled to escape the room. But in the end, none of them could outrun their fate. After the woman had finished her grim work, she slowly raised her hand. We return to Lin, who found a mountain of treasures inside the ring, including rare dragon string leaves and spirit jade marrow. He gently scattered the soil around the scorched wood, and suddenly, a surge of majestic life force erupted from the earth. The half-meter willow branch grew rapidly, reaching a meter in length, and then something quite unexpected happened. A piece of the branch snapped off and transformed into an emerald bracelet, sliding itself onto his wrist as a gift. He smiled, offering his thanks before feeding the dragon string leaves to the wind thunder eagle resting nearby. These leaves are incredibly nourishing for beasts, and after eating them, the eagle fell into a deep, drunken sleep on the floor. Its body grew at a visible rate as its feathers took on a metallic luster. Finally, Lin drank the spirit jade marrow himself. The warm, surging spiritual power dissolved within him, and he began circulating his cultivation technique to guide the energy through his limbs. While ordinary cultivators would inevitably waste a portion of such potent energy, Lin's unique method allowed him to absorb every single drop with perfect efficiency. Just then, Manhwa stepped out to call him for dinner, and seeing the subtle changes in him, her eyes filled with tears. He looked at her reddened eyes as she choked back a sob, insisting she was simply happy for her young master. She told him she looked forward to the day he would prove to the world that he was no useless failure. Lin immediately pulled Manhwa into a comforting embrace, promising her that such a day would indeed come very soon. She didn't ask for explanations, only wishing for his success, which touched him deeply as he finished his lunch and headed out. He soon arrived at the Wanbao Chamber of Commerce, where the old manager was busy arranging mystery boxes on the shelves. Lin stepped up to the counter and requested box 36, and the manager smiled, telling him to wait just a moment. Suddenly, a figure with bloodshot eyes burst into the shop. It was Zhao Hu, the man who had gone to raise more funds. Zhao Hu's voice boomed through the shop as he demanded the new batch of mystery boxes, specifically numbers 10, 36, and 52. He declared he would take them all, but the old manager looked troubled, explaining that while the others were available, number 36 was gone. That specific box had already been purchased by Lin, but as the manager reached to hand it over, Zhao Hu immediately stepped in to block him. He insisted these boxes were handpicked and contained his lucky numbers, convinced that one of them was guaranteed to hold a rare treasure. Zhao Hu glanced at Lin, telling him to pick a different box because he simply had to have number 36 for himself. He reached out to snatch the box, but Lin was much faster, pulling it away before firmly telling the man off. Lin made it clear that since he had already paid for the item, it belonged to him and no one was going to take it. Deep down, Lin wanted to tell him exactly where to go, knowing the Xing's secret was inside this box and nowhere else. However, he decided to keep quiet to avoid exposing the treasure, even as Zhao Hu's face flushed with a growing, violent rage. Just as a conflict seemed inevitable, the old manager hurried over to mediate, and Zhao Hu was forced to suppress his anger. To be honest, the Wanbao Chamber of Commerce was far too powerful for Zhao Hu to offend, so he used the manager's intervention as an excuse to back down. Lin merely gave him a cold, dismissive look before walking away. With his current strength, Zhao Hu wasn't even worth his concern. He hurried home, eager to begin practicing the Xing's secret, when he suddenly caught the scent of a familiar, delicate fragrance. In the next heartbeat, time itself seemed to freeze, leaving even the dust motes hanging motionless in the mid-afternoon air. Lin stood frozen in shock as a woman in red robes appeared before him, the very same woman from the stone coffin in the ancient tomb. A sudden, icy chill shot straight up his spine as he looked at her. The emerald bracelet on his wrist flickered with a faint green light, and a second later, the flow of time and the roar of the street rushed back. Lin snapped back to his senses only to find the woman in red had vanished without a trace into the bustling crowd. He searched the street frantically, but found nothing, wondering if it had been a mere hallucination or if the corpse was truly haunting him. He pushed down his unease and walked toward his courtyard with a heavy heart, unaware that in a nearby secluded alley, he was being watched. From the shadows of a secluded alley, the woman in red robes watched Lin's retreating back, her brow furrowed deeply as the hand that had touched his shoulder began to burn. Her flesh charred as if scorched by an intense flame, turning to blackened ash, yet her eyes remained locked on him until, after a moment, she began to follow. Moving like a ghostly specter, she trailed him silently until she saw him push open the gate to his courtyard, which was currently bathed in a faint, mystical glow. A look of unmistakable terror washed over her face, and the corpse woman recoiled, retreating into the darkness of the alley even faster than she had arrived. Once safely inside, Lin wasted no time in retrieving the ancient parchment, holding it up so the afternoon sunlight could hit the surface. He watched intently as the hidden script began to reveal itself under the warm glow. It is said that if one masters the Xing's secret, they can even outrun the flow of time itself, a truly staggering thought, to be sure. With this power, he would have the confidence to either hunt down powerful enemies or escape any trap. Then, the next morning, the system's mechanical voice returned. The first piece of intel revealed that a child of fortune named Yunshun would arrive in Goofing City tomorrow to scavenge a treasure worth over 100,000. The second report mentioned a master thief named Bai Xiaoze, who had recently stolen a rare teleportation talisman for the legendary Lingxi secret realm. Hearing these two updates, a smile spread across Lin's face. After all, a child of fortune like Yunshun has a real knack for finding the best treasures. He realized that if he simply followed Yunshun, he could essentially harvest all the best opportunities for himself. A clever, if slightly cheeky, plan. As for the Lingxi secret realm, it was a place of legend filled with immense opportunities, though it had long been monopolized by several powerful factions. The geniuses of those sects often possessed unique physical constitutions, which, for Lin, meant a perfect chance to advance his own power. He was determined to get that talisman, but he had a more pressing matter to attend to first, the 10th constitution of the Nine Jade Evil Sect's young master. Soon enough, we see him spotting two figures on the street, an old man and a youth, the latter being the young master himself, Yisha. The elder accompanying him was his protector, Old Imo. Lin prepared to move in, but noticed the pair suddenly quickening their pace toward the city outskirts. Lin frowned, suppressing the urge to strike immediately, knowing that while his current strength was enough to handle Yisha, the protector was another story. To be perfectly honest, facing Old Imo head-on would be reckless, so he realized he would have to find a way to separate the two first. Without hesitation, he began to shadow them as they left the city gates, heading into increasingly remote territory while he waited for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, we see Old Imo come to a dead halt as something ahead catches his attention. Lin wondered if they were being targeted by enemies, but realized that Old Imo leaving created a perfect opening. He immediately activated the Xing secret, blurring into motion to give chase, though Yisha quickly sensed the movement behind him. Realizing a threat was imminent, Yisha's eyes flared with murderous intent as he arrogantly shouted that he was the young master of the Nine Jade Evil Sect. He demanded to know who Lin thought he was to dare attack him, drawing a crimson warblade with a lethal flourish. As a wave of blood-red energy began to consume the ground, Lin merely let out a cold snort and quickly formed a hand seal. He unleashed the Human King's seal, a golden palm print descending from the heavens that made the bloody energy look utterly pathetic by comparison. Yisha was sent flying by the impact, crashing violently into the earth with shattered bones and blood spraying from his mouth. The young master struggled to look up, gasping to ask Lin's identity, but Lin offered no words before stepping forward to snap his neck. He then vanished from the scene, knowing the commotion would surely draw the attention of other nearby cultivators. In this world, leaving quickly is usually the only sensible choice. When Lin eventually opened his eyes again, he was pleasantly surprised to find his cultivation had reached the 5th level of the Linghai realm. Though he had started his journey much later than other geniuses, he felt the system would allow him to close that gap and eventually surpass them. Stepping out of his cave as night fell, he began tracking Bai Xiaoze, who was currently inside a ruined temple on Mount Deyu. The master thief was busy lecturing his attentive disciples on the finer points of larceny when a clever young boy spoke up. The boy asked to see the legendary treasure his master had stolen that day, prompting Bai Xiaoze to pull out a blue talisman. He waved it boastfully before his students, eager to show off his latest prize and give them a bit of an education. He explained that this was a teleportation charm for a secret realm, but before he could finish his sentence, his vision blurred. A shadow flickered past, and when he looked down, the talisman was gone, leaving the master thief absolutely fuming with rage. He gave chase without a second thought, but the dark figure was impossibly fast, leaving poor Bai Xiaoze struggling just to keep sight of him. Instead of closing in, the distance only grew wider until Bai Xiaoze stopped, gasping for air and refusing to accept such a defeat. He told himself it was impossible for anyone to steal from a master thief, taking a deep breath before lunging forward with everything he had. He moved like a bolt of lightning, yet he still couldn't even catch a glimpse of the stranger's shadow before the figure vanished completely. Bai Xiaoze began to question his very existence, wondering how a master of his caliber could be outpaced so decisively by a total stranger. He gritted his teeth and swore that if he ever caught the culprit, there would be hell to pay. But then, he returned to the ruined temple. As he stepped back inside, his disciples were waiting for him with a look of utter confusion on their faces. They explained that right after he gave chase, a storage bag containing 3,000 spirit stones and a small note suddenly appeared on the table. The disciple handed over the note, which simply stated that the Lingxi secret realm talisman had been taken and the stones were for compensation. Bai Xiaoze's heart was a swirl of complex emotions. It seemed the thief had already predicted he would never be caught. He decided to let it go, figuring the trade wasn't a total loss, while we see Lin returning to his courtyard with the prize in hand. With the teleportation charm secured, all he had to do now was wait for the gates of the Lingxi secret realm to finally open. The night passed quickly, and the next morning, the system informed him that the Void Realm would descend at noon that very day. By chanting the name of the Void Realm in his mind, he could log in and access a wealth of detailed information about this new world. The second piece of intel mentioned a saint herb called yellow blood grass maturing in the Great Wilderness, over 100,000 miles away. Lin raised an eyebrow and clicked for more details on the Void Realm, growing more astonished as he realized it was essentially a virtual network. It was a place where cultivators could trade and train, though he knew he would have to experience the specifics for himself to truly understand. However, the news about the Saint Herb left him speechless. It was so far away that he couldn't reach it in 30 days, let alone 3. Then, his eyes lit up with a clever idea. If he couldn't claim the herb himself, he could certainly sell the information for a high price. He decided to enter the Void Realm at noon, but first, he needed to beat the Child of Fortune, Yun Shun, to a piece of ancient jade. He arrived at the market stalls immediately, where a bearded merchant was busy tending to his wares, unaware of the treasure he held. While the merchant fiddled with his wares, Lin spotted the ancient jade immediately, suppressing his excitement as he asked for the price. The bearded vendor sized him up and demanded 500 spirit stones. Lin, acting shocked, immediately began to haggle with him. He asked if the man was trying to rob him, offering a mere 5 stones instead, and to his surprise, the vendor's expression shifted instantly. The merchant agreed, eager to make his first sale of the day, leaving Lin slightly stunned as he scratched his head in disbelief. Stealing a Child of Fortune's luck seemed almost too easy, but he didn't overthink it and simply handed over the payment. The vendor handed over the jade with a satisfied grin, while Lin was secretly overjoyed, which, naturally, was quite understandable given the circumstances. He had secured a jade worth 100,000 stones for next to nothing, and with that, he turned to leave the stall. Just then, a young man brushed past him, none other than the Child of Fortune himself, Yun Shun, who approached the bearded vendor. Yun Shun searched the stall carefully but found no trace of the jade, hurriedly asking the merchant only to learn it was already sold. His face fell instantly. He had come to Goofing City specifically for that soul-nurturing jade to sustain his master's fading spirit. Finding himself beaten to the prize, a frustrated Yun Shun pulled out 20 stones to bribe the vendor for more information. He desperately needed to know what the buyer looked like, and the bearded merchant gave him a rough description of Lin's appearance. After that, Yun Shun searched all over Goofing City but found nothing, his anger growing with every passing moment of his fruitless hunt. Suddenly, the ring on his finger began to glow faintly, and a pleasant, authoritative female voice echoed within his mind. This voice belonged to his master, Shun Xinlan, who had been watching over him from within the artifact all along. She warned him that while great opportunities awaited, they had to leave this ghost-ridden city immediately or face grave danger. Yun Shun obediently lowered his head and fled the city, while we see Lin returning home to study his new treasure. He soon confirmed through ancient texts that this was indeed a soul-nurturing jade, capable of strengthening one's very spirit. He was pleasantly surprised by this unexpected windfall, realizing why the system valued it at a staggering 100,000 stones. And then, a profound and mysterious voice suddenly boomed in his mind, announcing that the Void Realm had finally descended. Before long, the vast square was filled with a dense crowd of cultivators, each of them draped in mysterious black robes. Their faces were obscured by a strange, mosaic-like blur. Lin smiled, realizing that in this place, his true identity remained perfectly hidden. Soon, several clever cultivators seized the business opportunity and began setting up stalls, filling the air with the sounds of bustling trade. The square became incredibly lively as Lin cleared his throat and shouted that he had news of the sacred yellow scorpion grass. He claimed the lead was valid for 2 days and cost 10,000 spirit stones, a statement that caused the surrounding crowd to fall silent. One anxious cultivator asked for more details, noting that sacred herbs were legendary treasures that were almost impossible to find. Lin remained calm, reiterating that the price was 10,000 stones for information valid only for the next 48 hours. The man immediately tried to haggle, arguing that 10,000 was far too much for a mere rumor rather than the herb itself. Lin could only laugh at the absurdity. If it were the actual herb, 1,000,000 stones wouldn't even be enough to start the conversation. He told the crowd to shut up, firmly stating that the price was non-negotiable. They could either pay or get lost. Though the crowd was furious, they were helpless. In this void realm, everything was virtual, and they couldn't even discern his physical build. Just then, a figure in a black robe approached him, asking if the news about the yellow scorpion grass was truly authentic. The stranger offered to pay the 10,000 stones immediately, and Lin gave his word with absolute confidence that the lead was genuine. The robed figure, seemingly fearing a scam, threatened that he would hunt Lin to the ends of the earth if the information proved false. After the stranger handed over the stones, Lin shared the location of the herb, fulfilling his end of the bargain. A moment later, the buyer's figure began to fade as he left the void realm, leaving Lin to head toward the most mysterious sector. We see him arrive at the Eternal Gate, the most unique area of the Void Realm where cultivators are essentially allowed to dream freely. Specifically, it allows for cultivation dreams where the time ratio between reality and the dream world is roughly 1 to 12. Even more remarkably, the Eternal Gate contains 4 layers of dreams, with each of the first 3 layers being 12 times faster than the last. The 4th layer, however, is a complete mystery that no one has ever reached, as the difficulty of entering each level increases significantly. The cost of these spiritual snacks increases with each level, leading Lin to realize he'll need to gather quite a hoard to keep this up. The plan was perfect: hunt for opportunities by day and cultivate in his dreams by night, starting with his entry into the first dream layer. He focused his training on his movement speed, and before long, the system provided its daily intelligence report regarding the Lingxi secret realm. The realm would open tomorrow, and the favored child of fortune, Yun Xun, was destined to find phoenix blood there, the location of which was now revealed. The second report mentioned a cultivator named Chu Xian, who had stolen a moon-glazed fruit and was currently hiding away to treat his heavy wounds. As we see Lin study the first report, he can't help but marvel at the luck of a child of fortune who can simply find phoenix blood. However, since he now possessed this information himself, he decided that the phoenix blood would belong to him instead. As for Chu Xian in the second report, Lin remembered him all too well from their previous encounter in the Hengduan Mountains. Back then, Chu had been incredibly arrogant, using his high cultivation to demand a search of every single cultivator's storage ring. If Lin hadn't used his heaven-swallowing demonic art to create chaos and escape, he likely would have lost his treasures and his life. Now that the tables had turned and Chu was wounded, Lin decided it was time for a little payback and immediately tracked his location. Revenge was one motive, but the moon-glazed fruit in Chu's possession was also the exact treasure Lin needed to reach the Divine Palace realm. Meanwhile, the wounded Chu Xian was being hunted by the giant spirit gang, forced to hide in a secluded cave to recover his strength. After a long while, his injuries finally began to stabilize, and he cursed the giant spirit gang under his breath with gritted teeth. He vowed to exterminate their entire sect once he recovered, struggling to his feet to make a quick escape from his hiding spot. But just as he moved, a dark shadow flickered like a ghost. Chu Xian didn't even have time to react to the sudden presence. He was sent flying by a massive force, his back slamming into the rock wall as his freshly closed wounds burst open once again. The agonizing pain nearly caused him to black out, but he coughed up blood and desperately tried to maintain a defensive stance. He demanded to know who the intruder was, but Lin didn't bother answering, simply kicking him back and following up with a barrage of punches. Beaten beyond recognition, Chu Xian finally begged for mercy, realizing this mysterious attacker wasn't actually from the giant spirit gang. Chu Xian desperately cried out, asking what grudge Lin held against him, but Lin only stopped his fists to let the man die with a clear mind. He revealed that he was the one who took the treasure from the Hengduan Mountains, and today, he had come specifically to take Chu's life. With a single punch, Lin pierced through his heart. Chu's face twisted with rage as he realized the truth, but his words were cut short. The light faded from Chu's eyes, and Lin quickly took the storage ring before leaving the scene without a single look back. Returning home, we see Lin searching through the spoils until he finally finds the moon-glazed fruit, a legendary treasure of immense value. It is said that even half of this fruit can cleanse worldly impurities and help a cultivator overcome inner demons with ease. Without a moment's hesitation, Lin consumed the entire fruit and entered a deep state of meditation to absorb its potent energy. After a long while, a cold and majestic power began to radiate from within him, and a thunderous roar echoed in his mind. A grand palace was quietly being forged within him, the dwelling of divine sense and the very source of soul power. Lin slowly opened his eyes, feeling the qualitative change in his strength, and a satisfied smile played across his lips. The fruit had successfully pushed him into the first level of the Divine Palace realm, and he soon returned to the Void Realm to train. The next day arrived, marking the official opening of the Lingxi secret realm for all those who possessed the necessary teleportation charms. The first intelligence report revealed that Chu Feng, a disciple of the Jiuhua sword sect, would find the Great Eye Divine Art on the second floor. The second report mentioned Ling Chenxiao, a genius from the Jui Palace, who was destined to find a saint body's remains at the bottom level. Reading the first report, Lin couldn't help but chuckle at the mention of Chu Feng, a name that was becoming quite familiar. Last time, Lin had snatched an ancient beast egg right out from under him. Meeting him again would simply be Chu Feng's bad luck. Furthermore, the Jui Palace was a major enemy of the Lin family, having mocked Lin relentlessly back when his talent was considered low. Ling Chenxiao himself had once humiliated him, and if not for the timely arrival of family elders, Lin might not have survived that encounter. A cold smile touched Lin's face as he resolved that as long as he was there, Ling Chenxiao would never lay hands on those saint remains. Suddenly, the teleportation charm for the Lingxi secret realm began to vibrate, signaling that the journey was about to begin. A brilliant blue light flickered and pulsed incessantly, a clear signal to all cultivators that the Lingxi secret realm had finally opened and was ready for entry. Lin activated the teleportation charm with his spiritual power, and when he next opened his eyes, he found himself standing within a dense, ancient mountain forest. At first glance, it seemed no different from the outside world, but he knew he couldn't linger. He had to reach the phoenix blood before the favored child, Yin Chun. Before long, a withered forest of parasol trees appeared before him. The trunks were charred black and the leaves had long since fallen away. The entire area felt heavy with the scent of death, devoid of any signs of life, leading Lin to mutter to himself that he had likely found the legendary phoenix's roost. It seems the grove had completely withered over time, but after searching for a few moments, he finally spotted something beneath the thickest, most ancient tree. There, suspended in midair, was a droplet of crimson blood swirling with golden light, a sight that would take anyone's breath away. Inside the droplet, the faint silhouette of a phoenix radiated a vibrant life force. This was the true phoenix blood he had been seeking. Suppressing his excitement, Lin carefully stored it in a jade bottle and hurried away to find a secluded spot where he could safely refine the treasure. A short while later, Yunshin arrived only to find the clearing empty, his expression turning incredibly grim as he realized he was too late. In a fit of rage, Yunshin slammed his fist into a charred trunk, swearing that whoever stole the phoenix blood would face his absolute wrath. Lin, of course, was blissfully unaware of this outburst, having already found a hidden cave and set up a simple ward before sitting down with the blood. Taking a deep breath, he swallowed the phoenix blood, feeling the thumb-sized droplet begin to radiate a terrifying heat within his dantian. Beads of sweat broke out across his forehead, and his face twisted in pain as the intense energy began to circulate through his body. Yet, he did not flinch. He knew that refining such a heavenly treasure was a dangerous gamble where a single mistake could lead to self-destruction. But if he succeeded, his strength would undergo a qualitative leap, and so, as time passed, his very bones began to glow with a faint golden light. It was as if his flesh and blood were undergoing a true nirvana rebirth, a process that lasted until the very last trace of the phoenix's power was absorbed. Suddenly, a powerful aura erupted from his body, causing loose rocks to tumble from the cave walls as his breakthrough reached its peak. To his delight, he had reached the 4th level of the Divine Palace realm, and his physical recovery speed had reached a truly staggering level. Though he was thrilled, he knew better than to stay put, as the 2nd floor of the Lingxi secret realm was already calling to him. With the Great Eye Divine Art still waiting for him, Lin hurried toward the 2nd floor of the secret realm, but a sudden, violent sound of fighting caught his attention. We see him quietly approach the source, finding the favored child Yin Chun standing in a clearing, confronting 2 rogue cultivators. The 2 rogue cultivators were visibly fuming, arguing that they had found the soul lotus first, and that Yun Chen's attempt to seize it was utterly unreasonable. Yun Chen, surrounded by flickering lightning and an overbearing aura, simply declared that he was the only authority that mattered here. He claimed that even if the lotus were already in their hands, they would have to hand it over if he wanted it, a rather arrogant stance, to be honest. He told them to get lost if they didn't want to die. Faced with such a gap in power, the 2 men could only swallow their resentment. Just as they were about to retreat in humiliation, one of them caught a glimpse of movement and pointed frantically behind Yun Chun. He shouted for Yun Chun to look, claiming someone was already harvesting the soul lotus, but Yun Chun merely responded with a cold, skeptical sneer. He accused them of using a cheap trick to make him turn around so they could launch a sneak attack, as if he were some naive child. It was only when the voice of his master, Shen Xinlan, rang out in his mind that he realized someone truly was taking the lotus. Yun Chen's expression shifted instantly as he whipped his head around, only to see it disappearing back and an empty space where the lotus had been. At that moment, Yun Chen's composure completely shattered. He trembled with rage, thinking of all the treasures he had lost so far. First the soul-nurturing jade, then the phoenix blood, and now even the soul lotus was being snatched away right under his nose. The fury inside him boiled over as he roared that it was wishful thinking to believe anyone could steal from him, his body erupting in lightning. He gave chase immediately, but Lin merely let out a quiet huff and activated his movement technique to its full potential. In no time at all, Lin had vanished from Yun Chen's sight, leaving nothing behind but the sound of a frustrated, distant roar. Lin smiled as he tucked the soul lotus away, noting that Yun Chen was simply too slow before heading straight for the 2nd floor entrance. Back in the clearing, Yun Chen stood pale and defeated, looking very much like a man who had just suffered a profound psychological blow. He confessed to his master that he couldn't even keep up with the stranger's speed, let alone identify who his mysterious rival was. Shen Xinlan's voice was full of helpless resignation as she told him not to be discouraged, recognizing the legendary technique Lin had used. Shen Xinlan noted the lingering aura of the phoenix blood on the thief, confirming he was the one who stole it. Yun Chun felt even more aggrieved, hoping for a bit of sympathy. Instead of comfort, his master told him to simply accept the loss, causing Yun Chen's face to darken as he ground his teeth in pure frustration. he realized why even his lightning technique couldn't catch the stranger. Deep down, he swore a silent oath to kill the man who kept stealing his opportunities. After shaking off Yin Shun, Lin immediately arrived at the second floor of the Lingxi secret realm. To be honest, the scenery had changed quite drastically. The forests were gone, replaced by a dark, labyrinthine underground cavern. Guided by his precise intel, Lin headed straight toward the location of the great divine art. Meanwhile, we see Chu Feng clutching a blurry beast skin scroll, anxiously trying to match the faded markings to the confusing paths around him. He fumbled through the complex caves, unaware that Lin didn't need a map at all. Lin already possessed the exact coordinates of the treasure. Consequently, Lin reached the destination well ahead of Chu Feng. In the center of the cave, he found a skeleton sitting in a meditative posture. If his guess was correct, these were the remains of the great true Lord. Once, this secret realm was a complete world, and the Lord was a top-tier powerhouse. It was a somber sight to see such a master fallen here. Lin bowed respectfully toward the bones of the great true Lord as a sign of greeting. After his polite gesture, Lin's gaze fell upon a warm jade sword held within the skeleton's palms, which, naturally, was what he had come for. The jade sword contained the great divine art. Lin took it and prepared to leave, only to run directly into Chu Feng at the entrance. The moment Chu Feng saw him, his brow furrowed in suspicion. Lin quickly waved his hands, claiming they had never met and were complete strangers. With those words, he walked right past him. Having secured the divine art, Lin had no desire for any unnecessary conflict at this stage. Chu Feng stared at Lin's retreating back, a strange sense of unease washing over him. He hurried into the cave to begin his search. He searched every corner of the cavern, but found absolutely nothing. Chu Feng's expression turned grim as the realization began to sink in. He cursed, wondering if the man he just passed had taken the divine art. Suddenly, a flash of memory struck him like a bolt of lightning. He remembered seeing Lin back in the Hengduan Mountains. When they crossed paths then, Lin had the ancient bird beast Chu Feng had been hunting on his shoulder. Now, even the divine art was gone. He wondered if their fates were simply cursed to clash. Meanwhile, Lin reached the lowest level of the secret realm. He was searching for the crucial remains of the saint body. Around him, the rock walls were embedded with glowing blue ores that illuminated the space. The light cast an eerie, ghost-like glow across the cavern. In the center of this deathly silent place sat a massive, broken corpse, its lower half embedded in a stone altar. Ancient runes covered the surrounding floor. As Lin prepared to step forward, a handsome young man in black robes appeared. This was Lin Chenxiao of the Palace of Absolute Evil. Chenxiao was smugly sizing up the remains of the saint body. To him, this was the very prize the Lin family had been desperately seeking, and it was certainly impressive. Despite being dead for countless years, the physical body showed no signs of decay. Chenxiao mused that it now belonged to the Palace of Absolute Evil, which was a problem. We see Lin's gaze turn cold. The Palace of Absolute Evil and his own Lin family were ancient enemies. If one side wanted something, the other would surely interfere. Moreover, Lin's family had long hoped to find these remains to help his younger brother, who possessed the desolate ancient saint body, increase his strength. Having found it, Chenxiao had no intention of letting it go. But just as he prepared to collect the remains, Lin's figure suddenly vanished from sight. In the next heartbeat, Lin flashed right next to him and delivered a brutal punch directly to his face. It was a move that, frankly, Chenxiao never saw coming. The impact was so severe that Chenxiao's entire face momentarily twisted and deformed under the force of the blow. Enraged by the sneak attack, Chenxiao roared in fury and immediately activated his special constitution, the Extinction Demon Body. Demonic energy surged around him as dark purple flames lunged toward Lin. In response, Lin shouted the name of his technique, the Human King Seal. A golden palm print, accompanied by a towering phantom, manifested in the air. It carried a terrifying pressure as it smashed down toward Chenxiao. Chenxiao was sent flying once again, crashing deep into the stone wall while coughing up blood. It was only then that he finally saw Lin's face clearly. His pupils shrank in pure shock as he cried out Lin's name. Before he could react, Lin blurred forward and grabbed him by the throat. Lin lifted him out of the stone crater like a rag doll. His voice was calm as he noted it had been a long time since they last met. Without another word, Lin activated the heaven-devouring demonic art to consume the Extinction Demon Body. Chenxiao felt his very source of power being drained away. Terrified, Chenxiao screamed, asking what kind of technique could possibly devour his demonic power. Lin simply watched his face grow pale and gray. Lin's hand didn't stop for a second. Completely panicked now, Chenxiao began to beg, promising he would never cause trouble for Lin again. Lin only gave a cold, mocking smile. He knew Chenxiao wasn't sorry for his actions. He was simply terrified of his impending death. A series of miserable screams echoed through the cavern. Eventually, the Extinction Demon Body was fully refined, and Lin felt his own strength increase significantly. Lin's strength surged to the 5th level of the Divine Palace realm. After stowing away the saint body remains, he turned and left the deepest level of the Lingxi secret realm. Suddenly, he felt a distinct sense of repulsion, a clear sign that his time in the realm was ending, as practitioners can only stay for a single day. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the realm automatically expelled him. When he finally regained his senses, he found himself back in a very familiar place. He was back in his own small courtyard, where Wanyue had already laid out breakfast on the stone table. He took a deep breath and sat down, checking the day's intel. The first piece of intelligence revealed that Gufeng City was the origin of the Ling family. Finding a long-lost key would unlock the family's deepest secrets. The second piece of intel was even more startling. A heavily injured, desolate ancient saint body had just arrived in Gufeng City. Upon hearing the first report, Lin felt a surge of excitement. He knew Gufeng City was his family's ancestral home, but he had no idea it held such secrets. He had never even heard of this lost key. His thoughts then shifted to the second report, and he paused to consider the implications of a wounded saint body. He wondered if it could be his exceptionally talented younger brother, Ling Chun. If he wasn't mistaken, Chun had likely come to Gufeng City to visit him. Despite the massive gap in their status within the family, the two brothers actually shared a very good relationship, which, in their world, is a bit of a rarity. Just as he and Wanyue were about to start breakfast, a charismatic voice suddenly rang out, teasing Lin for looking so relaxed and at ease. A young man appeared at the table, dressed in moon-white robes with a dark jade pendant hanging from his waist. This was the younger brother, Ling Chun. Wanyue gasped in surprise at the second young master's sudden arrival and hurried off to fetch another set of chopsticks. Chen nodded his thanks to her. Lin took a sip of his porridge and looked up at his brother, noting that a busy man like Chen wouldn't visit just for the sake of a social call. Chen tried to remain calm, asking if he couldn't just visit his big brother. Lin, however, remained perfectly composed as he spoke. He reminded Chun that as the family's golden boy, he was far too busy for the elders to let him visit an insignificant relative without a specific reason. Hearing this, Chun lost his composure and quickly explained that the family hadn't given up on Lin. He had actually come to deliver two specific items. Chun pulled out a jade bottle containing Azure Sky Dragon Fluid, a potion made from a rare treasure he had personally found within a secret realm. With additional herbs provided by the family, this elixir was designed to improve a practitioner's talent, perhaps even helping Lin finally begin his cultivation journey. Lin looked at his brother with a sudden, serious intensity. He asked if the injuries Chun was carrying were sustained while searching for that main ingredient. Ling Chun froze instantly, completely caught off guard that Lin had noticed his condition. He tried to brush it off with a casual tone, claiming it was just a minor scratch. Lin didn't say a word, simply staring his brother down with an intensity that made Chen feel guilty enough to quickly pull out a jade pendant to change the subject. He explained that he found this pendant in a secret realm, and that according to rumors, their family held a deep secret right here in Gufeng City. Supposedly, this pendant was the key, and their father wanted Lin to see if he could discover anything. As Lin looked at the object, his heart began to race. He wondered if this truly was the long-lost key from his intelligence report. Without any unnecessary politeness, he accepted both the pendant and the dragon fluid. The two brothers spent the next hour catching up, enjoying a rare moment of peace before Chen finally stood up to leave, looking somewhat reluctant to go. He had only taken a few steps when Lin called out to him, tossing a storage bag through the air. "Wait," Lin said, "take this with you." Chen caught the bag with a puzzled expression, but the moment he peered inside, his eyes nearly popped out of his head. He started to stammer in disbelief. Before he could utter a word, Lin raised a finger to his lips, signaling for absolute silence. A brilliant, knowing smile spread across Chen's face. He realized his big brother was far more cunning than anyone imagined, hiding his true strength deeper than a well. Inside that bag lay the saint body remains. We should remember that before the secret realm opened, the Jui Palace had openly provoked the Ling family, boasting they had found the saint body's location. That claim had infuriated the family elders, but the Jui Palace disciples who entered the realm never made it out. To be honest, they probably should have been more careful. Now that the remains were in Lin's hands, the implications were clear. After seeing his brother off, Lin turned his full attention to studying the mysterious jade pendant. He placed a single drop of essence blood onto the surface, watching as the earth vein totem on the jade began to glow with an ancient light. He realized that by utilizing spatial nodes, he could instantly teleport to other locations across the 3,000 provinces of the primordial ancient realm. The only catch was a 3-day cooldown period between uses. Lin took a sharp breath, realizing the sheer power of the tool he now held. With access to these spatial nodes, the entire world was suddenly within his reach. After all, even a single province like Xianzhou is unimaginably vast. Imagine a land so wide that an ordinary person could walk for an entire lifetime and never reach the end. Now multiply that by 3,000 provinces. Even the Ling family, the strongest power in Xianzhou, only has a reputation that reaches the neighboring regions. In distant lands, they've never even heard the name. Most people would never interact with another province in their entire lives, but these spatial nodes were scattered everywhere, changing everything for Lin. Lin marveled at the 3,000 provinces, wondering which legendary ancestor could have created such a tool. He decided right then and there to test it out for himself. The Earth Vein Jade pendant required a 3-day cooldown period, so he decided to first handle the treasures he had gathered from the Lingxi secret realm. He planned to use the pendant the next day to explore other provinces. With a single thought, he entered the Void Realm and laid out the treasures he didn't need. Clearing his throat, he began to hawk his wares just like the other street vendors, calling out for passers-by not to miss out on his collection. He advertised ancient soul-nourishing jade, soul lotuses, and various other treasures. Meanwhile, a figure in a black robe was watching with growing excitement. This was none other than Yunchun, a child of destiny. Though he had missed out on the phoenix blood and soul lotus inside the secret realm, he wasn't empty-handed. He had gathered other treasures worth a total of 100,000 spirit stones, enough to finally buy soul-nourishing items for his master. His master, Shun Xinlan, replied in a flat tone that he was thoughtful, but warned that this was only the beginning of his dream realm training. She explained that after a few days of mastering her techniques and using these treasures, his strength would surely see a massive improvement. Yunchun nodded, promising his master that he would cultivate diligently over the coming days, as it was the least he could do for her guidance. As Yunchun began his search for soul-nourishing treasures, Lin's shouting suddenly reached his ears, cutting through the noise of the market. Yunchun couldn't help but laugh, telling his master that their luck was turning around. He had expected the search to take much longer than this. To be honest, he didn't expect to find a seller so quickly, but his smile soon vanished as he pushed through the crowd toward the stall. Standing before the stall, he saw not only the soul-nourishing jade, but also the soul lotus. In that moment, he realized exactly who had snatched them from him. Suppressing his internal fury, Yunchun forced himself to maintain a friendly facade as he looked at the man who had outmaneuvered him. He remarked that such soul-nourishing items were rare and praised the seller's ability to obtain both, claiming he truly admired such talent. He expressed a deep desire to make the seller's acquaintance, but Lin merely glanced at the black-robed man and spoke without any politeness at all. He told the stranger that if he wanted a discount by pretending to be friendly, he should forget it. He wasn't giving away any favors today. Yunchun struggled to keep his temper in check, insisting that it wasn't the treasures he was interested in, but the seller himself. Lin felt a sudden chill run down his spine at the creepy comment and immediately snapped back, calling the man a total pervert. Lin told him to get lost and stop being so disgusting. At that moment, the veins on Yunchun's forehead bulged as he finally reached his breaking point. He began to curse at Lin, asking who he thought he was and claiming he had endured enough. He challenged Lin to reveal his identity so he could kill him. Lin didn't hesitate to fire back, asking if the man was sick. He had been minding his own business at his stall when this stranger started harassing him. Now the man was hurling insults, and Lin wondered if he was simply an idiot. Yunchun roared again, demanding to know if Lin was brave enough to reveal his name. Lin simply replied that he wasn't. This left Yunchun so frustrated he nearly coughed up blood. It felt like punching a ball of cotton, which is never satisfying. Their loud argument naturally began to draw a crowd of curious onlookers. Seeing an opportunity, Lin ignored Yunchun and started shouting to the public. He invited everyone to look at his rare treasures, urging them not to miss out. This caused Yunchun to snap again, and he began fruitlessly kicking and punching. However, since they were in the Void Realm, they weren't in physical bodies. Yunchun's attacks had no effect at all, which was a bit embarrassing, really. The crowd began to inspect the treasures on the stall and started buying. One cultivator even began praising the ancient soul-nourishing jade and the soul lotuses. He noted that such treasures were incredibly rare, of high quality, and very fairly priced. His friend standing nearby quickly agreed with the assessment. The friend remarked that he had been worried about where to find soul-nourishing items and couldn't believe his luck in finding them here. Another figure in a black robe took a particular interest in the soul-nourishing jade, but just as he prepared to trade, the jade ended up in Yunchun's hands. Yunchun knew his master's soul was weakening. While the soul lotus helped, only the ancient jade could truly restore her spirit to its former glory. Given the current situation, if he didn't secure the jade now, someone else would surely buy it. He had to act fast, regardless of his pride. So, despite his deep resentment toward Lin, he felt he had no choice but to buy it. Meanwhile, the other black-robed man spoke up in annoyance. The man asked why a pervert like him was trying to snatch the jade. Yunchun roared back that the man was the pervert, and his whole family was too. He was already fuming from Lin's taunts, and now that he was being labeled a creep by others, he completely lost his composure. Lin was settling in to enjoy the show, but to his surprise, Yunchun was so angry that he simply logged out of the realm entirely. What Lin didn't see was Yunchun waking up in an inn, his pent-up grievances finally exploding. He hadn't even learned Lin's name, and was half dead with rage. To make matters worse, everyone now thought he was a deviant. He had never suffered such humiliation before, and so, he actually started to cry. They say a man shouldn't shed tears easily, but Yunchun had reached his limit, swearing that one day, he would uncover Lin's true identity. Meanwhile, we see that the treasures Lin was selling had long since been snatched up, allowing him to log out and return home. Once there, he prepared his Azure Dragon liquid and drank it all at once, feeling the medicine transform into a scalding torrent within him. Foul-smelling sweat and impurities began to seep from his pores, forming a dark pool on the floor as night slowly began to fall. When he finally opened his eyes, a golden light flashed within them. His skin was now as smooth as jade, and his meridians were wider. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth rushed into his body at an unprecedented speed, and he couldn't help but smile at the results. The liquid had truly transformed his cultivation talent, so he decided to enter the first level of the dream realm to practice his great eye art. He returned to the void realm to begin his dream cultivation, focusing on this spiritual technique as silver light began to radiate from his brow. These strands of light flowed into his sea of consciousness, gradually condensing into a hazy, mystical star map as the technique took hold. By the 36th rotation of the star map, he felt a violent tremor in his mind, and a piercing white light erupted from his forehead. The once hazy map became crystal clear, revealing the profound trajectories of the stars. After a full night of practicing in his dreams, Lin opened his eyes feeling completely refreshed, his mind so clear that he was now immune to most spiritual type attacks. Before heading out, he checked in with Manhwa to let her know he would be away for 3 days on a new journey. He then took out his Earth Territory Jade Pendant, choosing a random teleportation this time rather than selecting a specific destination. After injecting his power into the Jade, he opened his eyes to find himself in a strange new land, where his daily intel immediately updated. The first report mentioned a place called Night Village in the land of Guizhou, famous for a special milk that greatly benefits cultivators. The second report was even more intriguing. A black snake with dragon blood was currently evolving within the green mist forest. Many cultivators were already planning to ambush the creature while it was weak to extract its blood. Lin listened closely to the system's prompts. He realized the intel was now generating based on his current strength and location, confirming he was indeed in the region of Guizhou. Naturally, he wasn't about to miss out on the dragon blood, so he headed toward the green mist forest, a place filled with ancient trees. The branches and leaves intertwined overhead, blocking out the noise of the outside world, leaving only the sound of Lin's footsteps echoing through the mist. Suddenly, the furious roar of a beast shattered the silence, and Lin realized that the battle for the creature had already begun. He quickened his pace toward the heart of the green mist forest, and before long, he spotted a dragon that had just completed its evolution. This electric blue flood dragon coiled above the sea of trees, silently glaring down at the cultivators below, where the scent of battle hung heavy. Among them were burly men clad in animal skins, built like iron towers. These were the people of Night Village, their expressions grim and resolute. As Lin watched them grip their weapons, his eyebrows shot up when he noticed the 8th person fighting the dragon, a tiny little toddler. The child looked barely 3 years old, yet his combat power was absolutely terrifying, leaving Lin clicking his tongue in quiet disbelief. Imagine a 3-year-old with such strength. It was enough to make anyone feel a bit inadequate. While Lin watched, the battle reached a fever pitch. The black snake had exhausted a massive amount of energy to transform into a dragon, and though it succeeded, it was now in an extremely weakened state. These 8 people had timed their ambush perfectly to wound the dragon. Otherwise, taking down such a beast would have been nearly impossible. The village chief, an elder with a goatee, let out a low growl, urging the others to push harder as the dragon began to falter. He slammed his white-boned staff into the dragon's flank, drawing a pained roar from the creature as the others followed his lead. Their weapons rained down on the beast until, with one final mournful cry, the dragon crashed to the ground, and its life force completely vanished. The elder let out a long, heavy sigh of relief as he stared at the massive carcass, his body finally relaxing after the intense struggle. The other villagers slumped to the ground to rest immediately. They had succeeded in the hunt, but the cost to their energy was immense. Only the little toddler remained full of spirit, curiously inspecting the dragon's body, while Lin pondered his next move from the shadows. That body contained a trace of true dragon blood, which could be refined into a powerful tonic. But how exactly was he going to get it? Suddenly, a lean and agile figure lunged forward, swinging a war blade toward one of the Night Village men with overwhelming pressure. The villager had no time to dodge, and the blade sliced through him in an instant, showing just how terrifyingly powerful the strike was. The little toddler watched in shock as his companion fell, the life leaving the man's eyes as a startled cry escaped the child's lips. The child cried out for his third uncle as that lean, agile figure lunged again, launching a ruthless attack on another man from Night Village. The elder with the goatee shouted a desperate warning for everyone to be careful, identifying the attackers as the brats from Wood Village. Roars echoed from the trees as a dozen men from Wood Village charged out, and a fierce battle between the two settlements instantly erupted. The sky seemed to darken from the intensity of the clash, but the Night Village warriors were already exhausted from their hunt of the dragon. Outnumbered and drained of energy, the Night Village people were simply no match for their rivals and quickly found themselves overwhelmed. The elder ground his teeth in bitter frustration, unwilling to believe that the dragon they had worked so hard to kill was being stolen away. In their current state, however, they couldn't win, staying meant certain death, leaving the elder with only one painful choice. He ordered a retreat, and as they fled, the Wood Village men broke into cheers, their faces lit with triumphant, greedy smiles. They had secured a dragon carcass without breaking a sweat while dealing a heavy blow to their enemies, a perfect victory in their eyes. The Wood Village chief beamed with joy, ordering his people to drag the dragon back to their village as a trophy of their success. The villagers moved to obey, but as they reached the spot, they were met with a shocking sight. The dragon's body had completely vanished. While the Wood Village men scrambled to search the area, Lin, who had snatched the carcass during the chaos, was already far from the forest. He found a secluded spot and brought out the massive body, whispering to himself that if this beast held dragon blood, he would take it all. Deciding to use his heaven-swallowing demonic art to consume the essence directly, Lin sat cross-legged and placed the dragon before him. As he formed the hand seals and activated his technique, a powerful suction erupted from within him, and the dragon's flesh began to wither. At a visible speed, the beast shriveled as strands of pure energy turned into green currents, flowing relentlessly into Lin's body. His frame trembled under the dragon's overbearing power. The pain was intense, but he gritted his teeth and relied on sheer willpower to endure. A full day and night passed as he refined that terrifying energy, until finally, the massive dragon was reduced to nothing but a hollow shell. When Lin finally opened his eyes, an aura far stronger than before surged upward, his cultivation breaking through to the second level of the true spirit realm. Most importantly, we see that when he circulates his power, his skin is instantly covered by a layer of fine, protective dragon scales. The golden light covering his body is dazzling, and his defensive power has surged. Today's intel reveals that Yi Guiying, a disciple of Sword God Mountain, will obtain an ancient sword of immense origin at a weapon shop tomorrow. This blade is destined to be a major catalyst for his rise to the peak. As for the second piece of intel, the Xingyuan Chamber of Commerce in Fenghua City is holding an auction this afternoon. Among the items is a medicinal herb, whose value has been severely underestimated. In reality, it is the remnant root of an immortal herb. The Liang family ancestor used it to extend his life by 2,000 years and return to his peak strength. Lin immediately decided that the ancient sword must be intercepted, and as for that immortal herb, well, those are legendary existences far more precious than ordinary herbs. Even a mere remnant root is no small matter. Since its value is currently being overlooked, the price is bound to be a bargain, making this the perfect chance to snatch it up. However, since the auction doesn't start until the afternoon, he heads toward Night Village. He is quite curious to see what makes the longevity milk brewed there so special. We see that this is a very ancient settlement where the villagers live by hunting, so regardless of age or gender, everyone is exceptionally strong and fit. Unfortunately, due to the recent sneak attack by Wood Village, many were killed or wounded, leaving the entire village in a state of total mobilization for a fight to the death. Lin doesn't enter directly. Instead, he waits for the men to march out before quietly slipping inside. The air is thick with a rich, milky fragrance, and by following the scent, he finds a specific house in the village. Inside, a pot of longevity milk is simmering, infused with special precious herbs. Seeing this, he can't help but marvel that this milk is indeed extraordinary. Just a single whiff is enough to refresh the mind. With a quick thought, he simply takes the entire pot of milk and stores it directly into his storage ring. Just then, a small, tender voice pipes up. "Big brother, that pot of milk is mine." He looks down to see a little boy who looks like a porcelain doll, holding a large gourd taller than himself and pointing at the spot where the milk used to be. This little guy was actually the 8th person present during the dragon hunt. Being caught red-handed is a bit awkward, to be honest. But Lin remains thick-skinned, telling the boy he wouldn't understand how to drink it anyway, so he'll drink it for him. With that, he leaves behind some snacks and vanishes in a flash. The little boy watches him go and then looks at his empty pot, feeling as though his entire world has collapsed. He has no idea what snacks are. He only knows his milk was stolen right in front of him, and he's going to be very hungry. A piercing cry soon echoes throughout the entire Night Village. When the villagers rush over, they realize that little Xiao Budian's longevity milk has been stolen. Some of the villagers are absolutely livid, cursing openly and wondering what kind of scoundrel would actually steal milk from a small child. They claim he has no morals and vow not to let him go if caught. However, their attitude shifts the moment they see the snacks Lin left behind. The villagers immediately begin making excuses for him, suggesting that perhaps the thief wasn't so heartless after all, since he at least left some snacks. They decide to simply cook another pot for the boy, setting up a large cauldron to start the brewing process again. By now, poor Xiao Budian's stomach is growling with hunger. Not only is his milk gone, but his own people aren't even seeking justice for him. Feeling deeply wronged, his crying fit becomes so intense it nearly brings the village down, causing the villagers to complain about Lin once more. They grumble that he was truly shameless to take the entire pot along with the milk. Meanwhile, our protagonist has no idea about the chaos his theft caused in Night Village. He looks at the longevity milk with curiosity, eager to taste whatever makes it so special. He lifts the pot and takes a large gulp. A moment later, a searing heat rises from his stomach and spreads through his entire body. Lin is pleasantly surprised. He hadn't expected the milk to possess such remarkable properties. It doesn't just strengthen the physical body, but actually improves a cultivator's innate talent. No wonder that little boy was such a monster. Lin decides that after the auction, he simply must go back for another pot. He never imagined a tiny village could brew something this effective. Though, to be fair, it is far less potent than the Azure Sky Dragon fluid. But while that fluid is incredibly rare, this longevity milk can be brewed pot after pot. He mutters to himself that if he could just get the recipe, it would be perfect. He'll return to Night Village once the auction concludes. A little later, we see him arrive at the Xingyuan Chamber of Commerce. Every participant in the auction receives a black robe to conceal their identity, ensuring the safety of the cultivators. Lin enters the main hall and finds a quiet corner to sit. Soon, the auction officially begins. The first item up for bid is the Gale-Splitting Palm, a top-tier technique that the crowd immediately begins fighting over. Lin remains unmoved. However, since all the techniques he currently practices are the best in the world, he has no interest in such things. His goal for coming here is singular, the undying herb. As the auction continues, item after item is presented to the crowd, but Lin remains patient and hasn't made a single move yet. He waits until a precious medicinal herb is brought onto the stage. An elderly auctioneer introduces the item as the coiling dragon root, a treasure several centuries old. Apparently, consuming just a small fragment of this root can keep a man's vital energy abundant for an entire day, a true miracle tool for domestic harmony. The starting bid is 3,000 spirit stones, with increments of at least 100. Many cultivators begin bidding immediately, and in no time, the price of the root soars to 7,000. In the middle of the hall, a petite young woman gazes at the tall figure beside her. Her voice is clear and pleasant as she speaks. She tells her uncle that this coiling dragon root is extraordinary and insists he must win it. Liang Heng coughs awkwardly at this. He tries to act tough, claiming he is as vigorous as a tiger and has no need for such supplements. To be honest, he actually struggles in that department. But what man would ever admit to being weak, especially in front of his own niece? So, even though he is salivating over the root, he suppresses the urge to bid, fearing his secret might be exposed. He never expected his niece to be the one to actively encourage him to buy it. This makes the entire situation rather awkward for him. However, he doesn't doubt her words for a second. You see, his niece was born with golden pupils that allow her to see through the essence of all things. He breathes a sigh of relief, realizing she hasn't discovered his personal secret, but has instead spotted a genuine hidden treasure. Well, that changes everything. Since that's the case, he must have it. Liang Heng doesn't hesitate and shouts out a high bid of 10,000 spirit stones. The entire hall falls silent for a moment. The elderly auctioneer grows excited, shouting to the crowd if there are any higher offers. Lin frowns slightly, suspecting the bidder is from the Liang family, but he is determined to obtain this undying herb fragment. He immediately raises his sign, bidding 11,000 spirit stones. Liang Heng counters instantly with 12,000. This causes the audience to gasp in surprise, and they instinctively turn their gaze toward Lin to see if he will continue the fight. Left with no choice, Lin bids 13,000 spirit stones, leaving the entire audience stunned. The elderly auctioneer is absolutely ecstatic, but just as Liang Heng prepares to bid again, he is stopped by the petite Liang Shi. Her golden pupils are fixed directly on Lin, watching his every move with unnerving intensity. Liang Shi decides not to follow the bid, suggesting they deal with him after the auction. Liang Heng nods, agreeing to let Lin have it for now. And so, Lin secures the coiling dragon root for 13,000 spirit stones. He whispers to himself that the Liang family must be targeting him. After tucking the root into his storage ring, he turns and leaves without a moment's hesitation. He has no interest in the remaining items. To the rest of the crowd, he might look like a fool for spending 13,000 stones on a simple medicinal root. But Lin couldn't care less. To him, this fragment of the undying herb is worth 13,000 or even 130,000. If he can actually grow a full, undying herb from it, its value would be truly immeasurable. Seeing him depart, Liang Shi and Liang Heng follow suit. We see Lin leave the auction house and head straight for the city gates. Thanks to his training in the great divine sense, his spiritual power and perception have reached new heights. He quickly realizes that Liang Shi and Liang Heng are tailing him. Since the herb is already in his possession, he sees no point in an unnecessary fight. He pretends everything is normal and keeps walking. However, the very moment he steps outside the city gates, he vanishes in a sudden blur of speed. Yes, just like that. Liang Shi and Liang Heng rush to the gate only to find that they've completely lost his trail. Liang Shi stares in utter disbelief. He's gone. Liang Heng is equally shocked, as he never expected a mere cultivator to possess such incredible speed. Liang Shi's voice is now cold and filled with killing intent. She insists that the ancient herb fragment is special and they must reclaim it. Liang Heng pauses to think for a moment. He asks Little Shi if she managed to see the man's face with her golden pupils. With a hint of pride, Liang Shi explains that while the auction's black robes block others, they cannot hide anything from her special vision. She saw his face clearly. A cold light flashes in Liang Heng's eyes as he decides to issue a family hunt order immediately. No matter how fast this man is, he believes no one can escape the grasp of the Liang family. It doesn't take long for the hunt to begin. A massive number of cultivators begin searching for him, and Lin suddenly finds himself quite famous in Fuling County, having lost the Liangs. After shaking off Liang Shi and Liang Hong, we return to Lin as he arrives once more at Night Village, where the sounds of mourning fill the air. Everywhere he looks, bodies are covered in white cloth. The battle between Night Village and Wood Village was clearly brutal, leaving both sides devastated. He whispers to himself that with the village consumed by grief, it might finally be time for a serious talk with the chief. Soon, the villagers surround him. Their eyes are filled with deep suspicion. A burly, middle-aged man steps forward to confront him, demanding to know who he is. The man asks what business he has in Night Village, projecting a heavy pressure that looms over Lin like a mountain. Lin, however, simply ignores it. He states his purpose clearly. He has come to provide the village with spirit stones, but first, he must speak with their chief. The man eyes him intensely. After a long look, the man turns and leaves. Not long after, an elderly man with a goatee approaches. This is the village chief, Yishan. Yishan narrows his eyes, sizing Lin up from head to toe. He notes that good things don't just fall from the sky, and asks for a reason. Lin doesn't beat around the bush. Honest men don't speak in riddles, after all. He tells the chief he wants the recipe for their longevity milk. Yishan waves his hand in a flat refusal. The recipe is a closely guarded secret of Night Village, and no amount of spirit stones will buy it. He tells Lin that if there is nothing else, he should leave. But Lin remains calm, offering a bit of perspective to the stubborn chief. He points out that they live by hunting, yet with so many injured, they need stones for medicine and cannot go out to hunt. How will they survive? Hearing this, Yishan wavers for a moment, but he still refuses. He tells Lin not to worry about their affairs. The recipe is simply not for sale. Seeing that he is about to be kicked out, Lin decides to go big and shouts out an offer of 100,000 spirit stones. Chief Yishan freezes for a second before his mind catches up. Trying his best to remain composed, he counters by demanding 150,000. The surrounding villagers gasp in unison, convinced their chief has gone mad. Asking for 150,000 for a single recipe is bold, to say the least. Lin lets a look of disappointment wash over his face. He sighs, saying that 150,000 is far too much for his budget. He claims he only has 110,000 stones on him, so it seems the deal is off. With that, he turns around, pretending to walk away. The villagers frantically look toward their chief, and Yishan quickly caves. He calls out for Lin to wait, agreeing to the deal for 110,000. And just like that, Lin successfully secures the longevity milk recipe. Once the trade is finished, both sides are suddenly wearing very satisfied smiles. For Night Village, this was a staggering fortune that would not only provide for the grieving families, but also ensure their future security. As for Lin, he now had a steady supply of longevity milk to enhance his constitution and cultivation talent as he spoke with the chief. During their conversation, Yishan realized Lin was the very person who had stolen the milk and left the little boy in tears. But since Lin was now an honored guest, that was a minor detail, and Yishan prepared to host him with a fresh batch of milk. As the sweet aroma of the simmering milk wafted through the air, we see a small figure with chubby pink cheeks guarding the pot. Just then, the sound of footsteps approached, and Chief Yishan arrived, picking up the little boy with an expression of pure doting affection. He asked his precious grandson why he was standing guard, and the boy replied in a tiny voice that a bad man had stolen his milk before. He declared that this time, he wouldn't let any bad person take it away. Now, if any other 3-year-old said this, it would be funny. But this little one actually had the power to back it up, leaving Yishan feeling a bit awkward about the situation. He explained that an important guest had arrived, and he needed the milk to entertain him, prompting a clever, obedient smile from the boy. The boy watched as Yishan brought a small bowl, but it still seemed too big, so the child produced a tiny cup instead. He filled the tiny cup with just a single mouthful of longevity milk and held it up, telling his grandfather that it was ready. Yishan looked at his grandson, deeply moved by what he perceived as the boy's incredible maturity and generosity. After patting the boy's head, the chief simply picked up the entire pot and walked away, leaving the boy's world to crumble once again. With a soft thud, the tiny cup fell to the ground. The boy had intended for the guest to only have that single small serving. Unfortunately, Yishan had completely misunderstood and taken the whole batch, causing the little boy to burst into tears yet again. Meanwhile, Lin enjoyed the milk to his heart's content before bowing politely to thank Yishan for his hospitality. Yishan smiled warmly, inviting him to return anytime. It was a pleasant exchange for everyone involved, well, except for the little boy. The moment the boy saw Lin turning to leave, he recognized him as the thief from before and ground his baby teeth in frustration. He vowed to get even when he grew up. The next morning, a new piece of intel arrived. Lin's appearance had been exposed. Under the influence of Liang Shi's golden pupil, the Liang family is now hunting for Lin. Fuling County is no longer safe, and today's first piece of intel confirms it. The Liang ancestors once stole the 5-colored soil, a supreme treasure of Sword God Mountain, which laid the foundation for their rise. Its location is now confirmed. As we see Lin check the intel, he frowns, realizing that the golden pupil explains that strange feeling of being watched. To be honest, it all makes sense now. A cold thought flashes through his mind. If they are going to be ruthless, he won't play fair either. If they dare to hunt him, he'll simply take that golden pupil for himself. The golden pupil is a special constitution in its own right, and the five-colored soil is a treasure no less valuable than the western soil. If Sword God Mountain ever found out that the Liang family had stolen their five-colored soil, their fate would undoubtedly be miserable. In Fuling County, the Liang family might be the undisputed local kings. But compared to Sword God Mountain, the strongest power in Guizhou, they are absolutely nothing, which, naturally, gives Lin a very dangerous advantage. By knowing the secret of the five-colored soil, Lin effectively holds their lives in his hands. He plans to secure the soil first, and then leak the secret to the world. He whispers his plan to himself. For now, he must head to the weapon shop to claim that extraordinary ancient sword before doing anything else. We follow him as he immediately sets off for the 100 Refinements weapon shop. Inside, the air is thick with the scent of metal, and rows of blades line the walls. A burly man stands behind the counter, head down, meticulously wiping a rusty saber. This is the owner of the shop, a man known as Tai Sanhu. Tai Sanhu looks up, asking what kind of weapon the guest is looking for. Lin scans the room casually, telling him he is just looking around for now. Tai Sanhu chuckles and returns to his work. Shortly after, Lin's gaze shifts toward a bamboo basket tucked away in a dusty corner of the shop. Inside are a dozen nearly ruined longswords. But the moment Lin places his hand on one of them, he feels a powerful force of repulsion pushing back. Remaining calm, he grips the hilt firmly and pulls it from the basket. He asks the boss for the price, acting as if it's just a common trinket. Tai Sanhu frowns at the sword. He wonders if he even forged this piece, as he doesn't recognize it at all. Deep down, he feels a flicker of confusion. He tells himself he doesn't remember seeing it yesterday, but since it was gathering dust in the corner, he assumes it can't be anything special. Tai Sanhu holds up 5 fingers, asking for 5 spirit stones. But just as the deal is closing, an anxious voice suddenly rings out through the shop. The newcomer shouts for them to wait, claiming the sword for himself. Lin quickly tosses the 5 stones to the boss, telling him to keep the change. Before the words even hang in the air, Lin slips away. He already knows who the intruder is. It must be Yi Guxing, a disciple from Sword God Mountain. Since he had already agreed on the price with the boss, Tai Sanhu, and the sword was firmly in his grasp, Lin knew that staying to argue with Yi Guxing would be foolish. With the deal done, he immediately made a run for it, while Yi Guxing, like a blade unsheathed, chased after him with sharp and sudden intensity.